So let
It's
me
just
ask
crazy.
you, both you guys, a question kind of based off of one of the first things that you said when we were talking about interference and stuff in the states construing things different ways, right? So there's a lot of people that are obviously considering this as election interference, the removal of Donald Trump off of the ballot. There's a lot of people talking about that. I think that's certainly a very fair allegation. You know, it's difficult for me to. I already asked the question. It's difficult for me to consider this a free and fair election if the candidate that people most want is not on the ballot. So if we use that as the basis for the question, right? If we have these states that are in fact taking part in election interference, and we have states accusing other states of interfering elections, not just groups of people or administrations, right? Not like the Biden administration, the Trump administration, but actual entire states. Why? What? I mean, I guess that's the question. Just like, what do you do with that? What's the next? Because then it's not just an individual who's questioning the outcome of the election. It's an entire group of states who's saying this is not right because 3 of these states are interfering actively with this election, and so we can't trust this result. Like,
Was the
what do you-
allegation that tech? I mean, do you remember during the 2020 election, there was that big court case of the states filing against other states.
Okay.
And it was almost 50-50 split. And essentially it was Texas accusing Pennsylvania of passing unconstitutional voting laws, which by de facto hurt their state because it was unconstitutional according to the Pennsylvania Constitution. They couldn't change voter laws without a change in the state constitution, which they decided to do fucking anyways because, you know, pandemic, COVID
Because
stuff.
fuck
And they
'em.
said, fuck
Yep.
it. And when they brought that case up to the Supreme Court, which is where it belongs to handle differences between states, the Supreme Court says, we're not going to listen to this. Sorry. Good luck. And they just pass it on. Ever since then, it became a state-on-state issue. And there's only one direction that the nation itself goes.
with interstate conflict.
With interstate conflict. And I don't know what it looks like. Nobody knows what it looks like, especially in this modern age. But it doesn't go anywhere good.
I'll tell you what, if the issue is the Donald Trump election, I am not fighting in favor of the Pacific Forces. I am not doing that. I will not fight in favor of removing Donald Trump off the ballot. I will not do that.
I don't know. I think the Pacific Forces, as it were, would be taken over. It would become, we'll just say if it was a red and blue thing, right? The red would take over pretty quickly. I think they would start off as a blue region, and it would quickly turn into a red region because
we're putting his ass back on the ballot.
we got the landmass, we got the dudes with the guns. This ain't happening, boys.
It's good. Again, that's what's like scary though. I just feel like it's like weird. Like it's being raised in Washington, having lived in the South my entire adult life, basically post school. It's just like you kind of like look at it and like. I don't know, like, I don't, this is why I get so jaded. I don't know what the path is. And, like, I preach, like, this weird, just, like, I look at everything, like, as a normative or a positive, like, way. Like, what is the best outlook? And that's kind of, like, I go, but, like, it's literally to keep, like, my energy up. Because, like, I just, God, are we going to a civil war? Like, it just seems so, like, because, like, it's just, like, what is the next logical step? I don't know the next logical step, and that terrifies me.
The next logical step, so there's 2 ways it'll go. People, states, whatever it is, however it looks, will decide we're not going to do this and in some fashion push back.
Yeah.
Which is a dark road, obviously. Or the other road is that people just say they just go about their lives and the tyranny continues and the country evolves into a more direct democracy, authoritarian state where the states don't actually really matter. Everything, all the difference between states and the federal becomes so blurred that they essentially are one, which is we're pretty close to now anyways. And then we just find ourselves one day living in a brand new giant authoritarian state that just is the way it is. People will just go along to get along, try to pay their bills, try to work their jobs, and next thing you know, there is no going back. You're in a new nation now.
Can I posit another scenario as a question?
Please do, because I don't like those options.
I'm just
Yeah,
thinking.
I have some shit options.
My brain's just running as you're talking. So we're just spitballing now.
Spitballing, baby.
Is it possible that there is like, because to have a proper secession, it's got to be recognized, by whatever X amount of states and blah blah blah, right? But is it possible that there? Do you see a possibility? Because anything is possible. So let me frame it the right way. What is your take on the possibility of like unofficial regional secessions? Because there's been all kinds of talks of like Eastern Washington being like, we don't want to be a part of Washington State anymore. We want to be our own deal. There's going to be, I would imagine, in a world where the election plays out in the way that the scenario we're talking about, where lots of people question it, especially big portions of the country or certainly statewide portions of the country, that there are other regions, if not like, I'm not talking about regions of the country, but I mean like parts of states and stuff like that, that can kind of agree enough as a group to say, no, we're done with that. We're going to do a separate thing now. We're going to, I don't know, like, is that, I don't know. What's your take on this thing, both of you?
I think that's essentially the same. That's the same thing as some form of a civil war, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because that ultimately
You think that would involve active conflict, you think?
it would eventually. Because at some point, push would come to shove, and somebody in this new, more semi-autonomous region that we're just doing our own thing here, we don't recognize you guys. At some point, some Fed man would come to collect, and they'd say no.
Yeah.
And then escalation just builds from there.
Waco, Ruby Ridge, blah, 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 all the
But
fucking...
on a bigger
right,
regional scale.
Right.
That's, if you go that way, which I could see happening, but that's, I don't know how that's that much. That's almost like just a side road off of the more broader
Right.
Civil War aspect. It all goes the same direction to the breakup of the Union, if you will.
Because I'm just like, you know what I'm saying? I'm thinking anything as small as big as a region of the United States, a group of states that all agree, no, this is not okay, to as small as like a group of towns that are close enough together, that they can form a semi-independent economy where they're like, we just kind of all work and trade shit. We're spitballing. It's all very fucking magical, but like where they're doing that and then they're governed largely by a group of sheriffs, who are like, whatever. We don't want to deal with whatever you guys having going on, and so we're just gonna fucking leave them alone, because we don't want the trouble of whatever this might bring on, and it's not really harming anything for them to be doing their own thing and not be paying federal taxes or whatever they're doing. So I don't know how possible that is. I don't know how like magical that is or anything. I know, Larry,
Well,
what's your...
Yeah.
My thing is always, I think it's going to be a fascinating look, right? Because the question, like in states with less laws, I don't think they would matter as much, right? I think where it'll be interesting is states with high taxes, because that's X amount of revenue. So if you go to, because think about people living off the grid right now, they don't abide by really anybody's tax laws, right? And
Right.
that's why I think tax is fascinating, because they're not paying taxes in, right? They're not relying on the system. The question is when, if you are generating taxes and you're like, okay, hey, I'm not a part of this state, what protections do you have there? And I think that's when it's going to be pushed to shove. What action could they do to compel you? Because right now, we have a societal thing that we recognize, the FICO score, right? If you don't pay your taxes, eventually you'll go into collections, they can levy things on there. But if you don't see that they have a right to do that, because for example, California can't technically they cannot collect money on people who live in Nevada, right? They just cannot cross borders to do that. So if you say oh no, we're part of Nevada now, but then Nevada accepts it, who decides that? Because if we're already corrode what is our Supreme Court, who has the authority to decide that? And again, these are the fascinating things that I think it's going to be fascinating court law if it ever comes up, right?
A
And I think
Nevadian colony in California.
Well, the thing is, Colorado or California already has a law on the books now that allows them to levy taxes on people that moved out of state, during
Right.
the pandemic, and to say, if
Yes.
you've lived here over the last 10 years, you owe us taxes. And
Yep.
and the people are going, I don't live there, bro. You can't. New York State tried to come after me once for New York State and city taxes when I was on active duty, and then all I had to do was say, hey, here's my orders for that time I was here. And they were like, okay, cool, we're square. But it's nothing to stop anybody from getting that bill from the California tax man, and then just whatever kind of enforcement arm is able to reach out. And if you're say you move from California to Portland, Oregon, well, the odds are that the Oregonian authorities are probably going to be much more apt to try to clamp down on you because they recognize whatever bullshit law California passed. If you're in Texas, they're going to tell them to push rocks or to move along. So, so it
kick rocks.
It will kick rocks. Thank you. It'll be very interesting, as Larry said, that what will come of that, because it is happening now.
Yep. And it like you said, and I see a lot of it. It's like I get the tax. Like, so I've had to send very detailed outlines on when the client moved out of X state, just so the state will be like, okay, we're not coming at you for the taxes. But until then, until it's like levied or solved, they can still send you to collections while it's happening. And so like they can still ruin your life while you're just like literally working out like, hey, I'm not a part of the state, which again, I find fascinating. It's just like another ism of the life that like I've just never, you don't think about, but like is a big part of it.
And it's funny because, like you had mentioned earlier, let's say you're doing the proper thing, you get these bills from California, whatever, and you're somewhere else, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to fight this in court. And you're tied up in court for 3 years fighting this. The entire time, your credit score is getting hit because you're in collections.
Right.
What are you supposed to do about it? It's not going to come back.
Yep.
Yeah, they don't give you back 300 points when the shit's over if they find in your favor. They're just like,
I mean,
all right.
I was going to say it at the time, but like the moment had kind of passed. But I mean, we have the basic 10 from the Constitution, right? And one of those innocent until proven guilty. There's so many cases in the justice system, this one in particular, this scenario we're laying out, where, like, yeah, you might be found innocent at some point, but that shit that you're going to go through throughout your time in the justice system is going to do all the damage it does, and your life is going to be that much more worse off on the back end once you finally got your right to a fair trial and so on and so forth.
Right.
The damage has already been, there's a measure of damage that can be done just in the process. That is so against the concept of innocent until proven guilty that it almost might as well not exist.
Well, that is, I had like offhanded mentioned Ruby Ridge earlier, but that is right up with that, where they like, in the wake of you being apprehended, your wife is killed, your son is dead, you've lost half of your family while they're trying to take you in to maybe give you a fair trial.
Yep.
Like that's just because of the way that particular scenario, and I'm not talking about, I'm using that as an example to talk about the scenario that we are discussing of secessionist regions, where you're talking about if the feds come in, half of the people there die, and then the other half get brought in to fucking see trial with like, now you go to prison because you're not allowed to secede, and you also owe us $200,000 a piece in back taxes because you've been conducting business in this region without us for 5 years.
Yep.
And it's just like, again, I think it's been fascinating. I think like that's, and it's like weird because like
it's so it's so un-American. It's like so counter to the basic core tenets of freedom and just like, I just want to be fucking left alone, that it's really kind of disgusting,
Well, it's so much so that even like the Civil War was not seen by the victors as a civil war. It was just it was a rebellion in the South that was put down. They were never a separate nation.
Right.
They were never a separate nation. We had a Southern rebellion, and that was put down, and the Union was made whole.
Right.
They were never actually a sovereign nation, according to our history, because we don't allow for that.
And who does, like, when we went to war, like we mustered rifles, who's fighting the war? I think that's what's fascinating today, because like it's just like like I know we said we would never have like another, end of times type thing again, but like like now who fights the war? Like who goes to quell the dispute? Like does California muster their National Guard to go over there?
Yeah.
I think this there, but I don't know if we're close to here, but I think this is going to be a fascinating thing because like if they don't, like if California like can't do that, then like now we're looking at like, oh well, they didn't stop any of like these problems in the South, or sorry, they didn't stop the problems, and now these people don't have to pay taxes. Why would I? So it kind of begets a system, right? Like our system of taxation only works if people like are willing to basically be taxed, right? Because like if you're not willing to be taxed, like then why would you do it? Why would you do it, right? And so like if you participate, like they can't collect money, like they have no power.
If you start seeing mass defections in the force that you've mustered to try and quell the rebellion that's there, and I also think about like the actual combat aspect. I don't know how long you're going to be able to convince Americans to go out and shoot other Americans because they're not paying taxes, because they're doing bad shit, you know, because they're doing whatever they want up in the mountains, and we can't be having that. Like, I don't know how long. I mean, I've never served. I'm certainly not in right now, so I don't know what the general morale or like level of unquestioning, you know, fortitude is in the military. So I don't know how many people would immediately say yes if they're called up. If shit goes, let's give it like a really bad timeline, like 9 months. If tomorrow shit starts getting really bad, you know, or by the end of 2024, election, right? So early 2025 is when they're supposed to be inaugurated. At that point, whoever it is gets inaugurated again, and those states that have recognized are like, no, fuck that. This is the last step. Like we're fucking seceding, right? Combat starts to happen. I don't know how many of those, if it is the National Guard, how many of those National Guardsmen are going to say, yeah, we'll do that. We'll go and start shooting Americans right now. And even if it is most of them, how long are they going to do that? How many missions are they going to do where they fucking shoot somebody they went to high school with, or somebody that there was their fucking neighbor down the block? How long are they going to do that before they don't agree, or they're too fucked up in the head by killing people that they recognize that they can't conduct combat anymore? Like, I don't, you know.
Well, and the thing about like
how long can you fucking sustain that?
Like
Because
we asked that question, right? But everybody in the military now there's no concept of fighting fellow Americans. You're always fighting a war abroad somewhere, right? That's what you do. We haven't fought any war on our own soil since like the Civil War, right? But like our modern army, for generations, you know, there might be some federal agencies that have had gunfights on the border and stuff like that. But it's a totally different. You're not talking about the military.
We haven't seen any warfare here since World War II.
And there's zero ability to even guess what the armed services would do if they were asked to turn themselves inward. I would venture to guess that 90% of people would be like, we're not going to do this. Unless there was some kind of egregious, massive, like terrorist attack by a group that claims sovereignty somewhere to do damage on someone else, then automatically they can see them as the bad guys.
In defense of the nation. But if they're just chilling and the government now is recognizing them as a hostile force or whatever they're going to call them, you know.
Welcome to the south of the streets, coming at you every